Welcome to the Corporate Law Lab podcast. This podcast will explore different themes around corporate law and is produced by the Corporate Law Center of the University of Cincinnati College of Law. I'm Neil Taylor, Director of the Corporate Law Center and one of the hosts of the podcast. Our guest today is Adeola Adebonojo. Based in the UK, Adeola is an experienced General Counsel and Company Secretary. Her varied career has included serving as General Counsel at Helios Towers and Solaris SE. She's also worked with Accenture. She received her postgraduate degree in law from King's College London and an MBA from HEC in Paris. Welcome to the podcast, Adeola.
Thank you very much, Neil, for having me. This is very exciting for me to be here.
Well, thank you. So we have known each other for quite some time. We actually overlapped at HTA when I was Chief Legal Officer and running, at times it seemed everything but the legal department between supply chain, HR, and you came on board as General Counsel to handle the day-to-day operations, and then when I left, it was all yours to
It was
deal
all
with.
mine, indeed.
But let's go back from when we met to, if you could just talk about how you became an in-house lawyer, because I think, with you being from the UK and, different background than what American lawyers may be accustomed to, I think it'd be useful for you to just take us from getting out of law school and deciding you wanted to be an in-house lawyer and how you went about pursuing that.
Yeah, so I've had I always say my path was a bit unusual. So after I did my law degree, unlike the US, in the UK, you can go straight to a law degree. So I had my law degree and immediately thought that I was going to work for a company. And so one of the early options that I had at the time was to work in-house as a legal advisor. And I was then given the opportunity to train in-house. So I actually had my legal training in-house. I didn't necessarily follow the traditional route of doing your law degree and then doing your exams and then going to work for a law firm for 2 years. I instead worked in industry for 2 years. And then the Law Society at the time looked at all the work that I had done. I had also done 6-month stint private practice as well. So the Law Society thought in their thinking that I could, you were to submit your experience, and from that basis I qualified as a solicitor. And this is really a sort of a pioneer. It's now very much the norm in 2024. You actually now have 2 separate streams to qualification, which is really formal. Either you qualify in-house or you qualify in private practice. So I am more of the in-house route and one of the early pioneers of doing that.
So one of the original hybrids.
I was the one. That would be me.
So in, what was it, 2005, 2006, you joined Accenture
Yes.
shortly after you qualified as a solicitor?
Yes. So the year I qualified as a solicitor was the year I changed. So in between, because I like to do things in a very complicated manner, I also had my first child in between. So between 2004 and 2006, not only did I qualify as a solicitor, I also had my first son. And so it took all of that time, took some time off for maternity leave, and then popped out at Accenture in 2006.
Great. And talk a little bit about what you did at Accenture. You were there for quite a while, and
Yeah.
the decision to pursue the role at Helios.
Yeah. At the time, 2006, it didn't get any more premier or premium than working in-house in a company like Accenture. If you're going to work in-house, even now, if you had an opportunity to work at a company like Accenture, then you had hit the jackpot. And so, and as you know, Accenture is not just management consultancy, but they do heavy duty outsourcing deals. So it's a very, very transactional role. And Accenture was like a mini law firm. I think at any given time, there were at least 60 people, 60 lawyers on one floor. And we covered everything. We did everything from M&A to employment law to data protection to transactional stuff to, all the things that you'd expect to litigation. We had our own litigation in-house team because it was big enough to absorb that. And we actually had really experienced law firm partners who came into Accenture, second into Accenture, because of the kind of talent that we had there. So it was a very good place to earn your stripes, if you like. If you've spent some time at Accenture, you can pretty much do any of the deals that is going, because you're sort of thrown there to support the business and do what's required. What was the other part of your question?
About the decision then to pursue,
Yeah,
from Accenture, which, everyone's heard of,
yeah,
everyone says, oh, that's a reasonable place to work, a great place to learn. And then in 2012, I'm guessing it is,
2012. Yeah.
you um, you interviewed for a job as the day-to-day general counsel of Helios Towers, which
Mhm.
was African based. I mean, we were based in London, but
Yeah,
all the operations were in Africa. It's
yeah,
completely different thing in a startup.
yeah.
So what was the why did you even think about doing that? What was going on in your career that you thought it was time to make that move? And
Yeah.
just talk about how you came to that decision.
I've always been a bit of a. I'm never comfortable in one spot. So after you've been at a place like Accenture for 6 years, I knew that I wasn't going to get to the heights of my career at Accenture. Um, Not because of anything that Accenture was doing. It's just there were too many of us who wanted the same thing, and there wasn't enough space for all of us. So I recognized that very quickly. And much as Accenture gave me that comfort, everything was done. We had all the processes, all the policies. We were trained to within an inch of our lives. We knew everything going. I think when Helios came across, first I'd never heard of them, but I think the attraction was telecoms. The idea that we were building telecoms infrastructure in Africa. And I remember at the time when you interviewed me, and I think it's a standing joke. You remember, um, I think I was probably the second person of African descent that was working. I can't remember. There were very few of us. And I remember you said someone had said to me, "Oh, you're from Nigeria. You must have been to all the countries in Africa before." And I remember saying, "Well, actually, I've never traveled." I was the least traveled person at Helios. And it was always a joke. And I remember the first time I was asked to go to Ghana, and you almost, I don't know if you remember, with the bout of malaria, where I was almost shipped back. I
Yeah,
was
I do
almost,
remember.
I was almost shipped back because every single, all of us were there for a board meeting. No one came down ill but myself. So, and putting all of that aside, it was just we were doing something really incredible there. Telecoms infrastructure, mobile telephony had just blown up in Africa, and the idea that we were helping, we're enabling that sort of infrastructure was an attraction. It was small, so it was a bit unusual. I'd never worked in such a small company before, but it was small, but it was mighty in the kind of reach that you had and the kind of um, the significance of the things that we're doing. So, and I never shy away from it. I'm never challenged by stuff. I'm very brutal about my career. I use my career. My career doesn't use me. So I knew that this was going to take me somewhere new. So yeah, that was the attraction.
So from what you expected going in, how much was it different, or how much was it what you expected, and how much was it completely different than what you expected? And talk about that.
You mean difference, sort of? You mean when I started at Helios, or the difference between the two, between Accenture and Helios?
Well, either one, but I guess you know, I've had the experience. Like, I remember when I joined Millicom, I felt like there was this super highway that I was standing on the side of trying to figure out how to get on, because there was all this stuff happening. And I was supposed to be, as general counsel, in charge of much of it. And just
Yeah.
finding your way into the path of the business, I think, at Helios, and the differences between Helios and Accenture got to be obvious to most, but because it was where you had one lawyer, I think, in each of the markets.
We had, yeah, we hired one lawyer in each of the markets, and we built it out from scratch. And I think we did a fantastic thing out there, right? So from the infrastructure that we built there is still there today. Some of the lawyers that I think hired are still there, maybe, I'm not sure. But I think the good thing was what Helios did for me is I was thrown out of my comfort zone. You were quite brutal, and you were sort of in a good way, sort of go go to, I don't know,
Kinshasa.
Kinshasa or Rwanda, and I'm thinking, to do what? And it was, sink or swim kind of. So that challenge meant that I had to find my own feet in those jurisdictions, build my own relationships, ask my own questions. I think it wasn't for the faint-hearted, to be honest. You needed to have a level of confidence in yourself, to ask the right questions. And I think the other thing that was also different was no one always had the answer. So all of us were almost figuring it out as we went along, right? There was no, I remember when I was brought on board, and you and Chuck, I think it was you and some other person said, look, we have no policies, we have no processes, we know what we need to do, but we haven't done it yet. So, carry on, and let's build this infrastructure. So, knowing that you're responsible for making sure the infrastructure was right was helpful. Rather than you inheriting something, you're kind of building it, and so you have a bit more ownership to it. And I like that. I like the responsibility that comes with building. And even in my current roles, my last GC role, which I just exited, it was similar. It was fast paced, but they hadn't built anything. So the idea is to build infrastructure that was going to last, that was sustainable, that wouldn't get us into trouble. And I think that was the difference with, it's the thing I also liked about being at Helios.
Um, how did you go about learning the business? Because, obviously, with what you've already said about the place, there was no formal induction program. I mean, there just wasn't. There were 15 or 20 of us trying to, invest $500 million in Africa as fast as we could.
Good. Yeah, 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 yeah. Just being a bit of a nuisance, to be honest. You just ask loads, and I don't even think I asked enough questions, because because everyone was so busy, I was very conscious of not being a nuisance. So sometimes I sometimes kind of held back and tried to figure out things myself. But I think the end game for me, or by the time I'd been there the second year, I realized this answer isn't gonna drop in your lap. So you're gonna have to go look for those answers. So going out to those markets, spending time, I think I was traveling every 6 weeks. I was in another country, whether we're trying to break into that region or whether we already had a presence in that region. And you kind of built relationships along the way, because, like I said, we're all figuring it out as we go along, and we're allowed to be a bit naive. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you raise an important point, where you said that you spent a year like trying not to be a nuisance, trying not to ask all the questions, and then figured out that, no one's going to just tell you this stuff.
Yeah.
You have to just dig in there.
Hmm.
If you had it to do over again, you would probably, or you would advise, people listening to the podcast, just get in there, ask your
100%.
questions. Nobody's
100%.
going to think you're stupid if you say,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
"How
yeah,
does
yeah.
this thing work?"
Yes, yes. Even now. So now, I mean, I've written articles about this. Do not be shy. In fact, what I found is the business actually don't mind you asking these questions, because sometimes a lawyer is seen as, ivory tower, and, are looking at things and mustn't disturb. But if you're able to speak their language and be curious about what they're doing and how they do it, it's always, always a good thing to have with your business people, your business partners, and then you truly become a business partner of the business. So, um, second year, you just ask, what does that actually mean? Show me a tower. what is this thing that is appended to it? Why is it appended to it? All of those really silly questions, but are really important for you to understand what your role is going forward. Ask those questions. Anyone that comes to my team now, I'm going to you're going to spend 1 week with the business, just understanding what is it we sell, how we sell it, how we make money.
So I think you did something with what was it called, Crafty Counsel, where you
Mm,
talked about the role of in-house counsel and being a business enabler.
yes.
Um, and that's one of the things that we certainly talked about
Mm,
a lot of, the reason that you were there as in-house counsel is to help the business achieve its goals and faster than they would if they were relying exclusively on outside counsel.
right.
So talk a little bit. You've broken it down certainly more than that. If you could just talk about the business enabler path that
Yeah.
you've set out for in-house counsel.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of said that as the GC at a leadership level, but I think it applies to. I've had people reach out to me who are not even GCs who have found it really helpful. And all I was trying to say there is, look, we need to stop given the impression that we're in our ivory tower, because I don't like the narrative of the lawyer being, oh, it's gone to legal, oh, it's going to be slowed down. We get that's flack for slowing down the business. And so I thought about, how do we, and I think it's something that you say often, how do we help the business move quicker, which is all that is about. And not only is it about understanding what the business sells, or how they make money, is also the interpersonal relationships, your stakeholders as well. So for me, not only am I not only do I need to understand what I'm selling and how I'm selling it, but I also need to understand who are the people that are really who are my stakeholders, who need to be happy all around, whether it's my shareholder or the regulator. Even the employees become really critical on how they interact. Um, Strategy was really something that I enjoyed. I think I picked up the strategy piece at Helios once, and I think you involved me with it in the beginning, and then as I led the team, became a focal point of understanding where everybody's head is at and where we're going. And I think sometimes legal, we're often left behind in there. We're sort of, it's always reactive. And so we are hearing it secondhand. Whereas if you were in the room where these discussions are, you may not have much to contribute, but it helps you inform the decisions on how you run that team. How quickly I run a deal, or how quickly I close a transaction becomes really important once you understand where the end goal is, the end game is. So understanding the strategy, we don't like strategies as lawyers, we like certainty. And strategy is all about uncertainty. We have an idea, but we don't know how we're going to get there. We'll try it this way, or we'll try it that way, but we're going there. And lawyers just like it to be black and white. This is what the law says. That doesn't go, so therefore we're not doing it, which is what our businesses do not like to hear. So yeah.
So how did you educate the business to allow you to serve them the best?
What did I? I'll talk to my last GC at Solaris. It was more of a thing because I'd done the MBA, right? So, and I think that's where my MBA played in, because um, I remember when I was hired, my the chairman who since exited, um, I wasn't hired for technical skills at all. I wasn't hired. I know that. I'm not a financial services lawyer. I'm not that. But the thing he said was, "You've done an MBA. You know what I'm trying to do here." Right? And he was about to exit. We'd been bought by a German bank. We needed to close that transaction, and there was going to be a period of integration. And all of that needed steady hands. All of that needed the teams to be calm as we progress through. And so that element of knowledge and confidence and gravitas that you show the business was what I brought to the table. Um, so the MBA helped, and I spoke the language. So um, and even when I was at Helios, I don't know if you remember, I asked you a couple of times, or maybe you left, I can't remember. And I went on to this course where it was the learning financial accounting for non-financial people.
Yep.
And so I quickly understood the three, the type of financial statements I needed to be looking at. And, even now, if I'm looking at opportunities, the first thing I look at is their financial statement. I'll go into a company's house to see how well they are. Just to get it might not be thorough, it might be dated, but at least it gives you an idea of where it is. So once you're able to speak their language, if you're coming across as very lawyery and you're not going to understand where your COO is coming from an operations point of view, or your CFO from the financial or whatever, they're not going to buy in to your leadership. So I think we've seen a lot of my friends that are in leadership positions are beginning to shed that sort of legalese, and they're wanting to speak more about the business and driving growth and all of that good stuff. So I think once they realize that this isn't about just being a lawyer and that actually I kind of understand where you're coming from, then people get a bit relaxed. But I think there's still a long way to go for businesses to intuitively want to be best friends with the general counsel or the chief legal officer. It's always like, "Oof, she's a lawyer or they're a lawyer. Oof, they won't understand." And, and it's my mission not to do that. My mission is no, just accept that I'm a business person. I also happen to be a lawyer. That's how I've sold
Yeah,
myself.
I mean, I think I was thinking of a concrete example of where you ran the project. It was,
Mhm.
one of my ideas, but where we took, ground leases that
Oh
towers
yeah,
sat on,
it's a very good example.
and and we took 10 and 15-page documents and kept boiling them down
Perfect lease
to the
projects.
plain English,
Perfect lease projects. Remember, that
the
was it.
perfect lease project.
Perfect
That's
lease
right.
project. I
I
think
forgot
it's
that we
still
had a name
going,
for it.
actually. I think that
Yeah,
was
probably.
genius because we took one, and again, it just sped up significantly the way we signed leases, because our business required towers to sit on long-term leases. We had disparate leases of different jurisdictions across Africa. How are we going? Somewhere a one pager, somewhere 12 pages, you know, different language, it was just chaos. And I remember when you floated the idea, I ran with it. And not only did we have the perfect lease that was on two pages, I remember we said no more than 2 pages.
Right.
Not only did we do that, we then had an escalation matrix, which meant that I created a spreadsheet where these certain clauses business could deal with. Anything that touched those clauses that were really critical for us from a legal point of view came to us. And so it became our lease manager's mission in life, because he needed to close those leases, not to touch those legal. So he'll fight tooth and nail with the landlord to say, no, 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 no. These ones aren't going to change. This I can play with. Your money, how much you get, when you get it, yeah, that's fine. But anything that requires me to go back to my lawyer because I'm not allowed to change this part, you won't. So it made it much more streamlined. And I'd be so, I'd completely forgotten about that. But I think that was a really, really good way of how we enabled the business to very quickly, because that was critical to us, to have all these long term. I think it was 25-year lease, 50-year lease. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, it depended. It was dependent on the country how long the lease
How
could
long you could
be.
get the lease for? That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. I remember Tanzania was 30, and anyway.
Yeah.
But I think a key point from that is, when you talk about those clauses that couldn't be touched, the reason for that, if I recall, was that those were fundamental to the value of the
Of the
business,
business. Exactly right. Exactly
right?
right.
And if you didn't, if you hadn't understood what the
Exactly.
underlying strategy and
Especially with
value of the
walls.
business was, you could not have done that project.
I couldn't have done it. And that's exactly the strategy. So it was about extracting value from the land, right? It was about continue sustainable value, because those towers needed to the lease couldn't expire with the tower on it, because
Right.
otherwise we were in trouble. So um, we gave a lot of leeway, and we're quite flexible in terms of how much we would pay for a lease, because we could play with that. What we couldn't play with was you terminating the lease for convenience. Not going to happen.
Right.
You would have to, because that just completely undermined our business strategy. Um, and I think having these discussions, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't care if I didn't know that. Like, yeah, we can terminate for convenience as well. What's the big deal? But understanding that if you terminate it for convenience, and we've got um, mobile network operators that have the microwaves on our tower that was on a long-term lease as well, where are we going to go? Where are we going to put it?
Yeah.
And it became really that was was an eye. I think it was then that I went to actually go and look at a tower and see it and see all the things that was attached to it and see how the microwaves were placed and how many we had on each. And so I knew that that had a 12-year lease, 12-year lease, 15-year lease. So therefore the land could not be less than the lease could not expire before any of those other those tenancy leases expired. It's a very, very exciting time actually.
So you mentioned getting the MBA at HEC.
Mm.
Why did you decide to do that, and how did it affect your legal career?
Um, so 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 an MBA in the UK, lawyers having an MBA is still uncommon. It's very much you hear it a lot more in the US. And I remember a few colleagues were like, "Well, how are you doing an MBA? I mean, well, you've been a GC, you can be. It's no big deal." But I do know the reason why is I think for the 5 years I was at Helios, I aside from the areas that I knew, there was a hell of a lot I didn't, and I spent a lot of time playing catch up. And as a lawyer, I like to have my fundamentals right. So, when we're talking about, value in our company, for example, because we were thinking about a process of an IPO and all the drivers that informed that. And I remember I was speaking to, I can't remember the COO at the time or the BDO, Business Development Director, I can't remember what title he had, him talking to me about the WAC module to help us understand what the valuation would be. And he was like, over my head. And I nodded going, yeah, yeah. And I remember scrambling trying to understand it.
So
And I,
so for the non-MBA holders out there
yes,
listening, WACC is weighted average cost of capital.
yeah, weighted average cost of capital,
Okay.
they had all these acronyms and net present value and all that good stuff. And I probably managed it, but my God, I was stressed by it. I don't like not knowing. So what the MBA did for me was I spent probably a good part of my MBA going, oh, is that what it was? Because I could relate immediately to all the things we were trying to do at Helios. Um, and so what it's done for me now is the confidence. That means I can turn my mind to anything. I remember when I finished my MBA, I told my husband, I said, I wanted to be a CEO of a company. And he laughed. Not laughed because he didn't think I could do it. He goes, yeah, that's what the MBA does to you. It makes you feel like you could do anything. I'm like, I can do anything. I can run a business right now. I know exactly. And he goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the power of the MBA. Just calm down, calm down. But no, but what it's done for me is there is no sector that I will go into that will phase me. All I need to know is those 5 things I have in the business enabler. I want to know, are you making money? Do you have any money? Are you profitable? When are you going to be profitable? Who are my stakeholders? Who are my players here? Who do I need to appease? Who do I need to ensure I don't take? Those kind of practical things. Once I've got that in my head, I'm good. So I'm not second guessing myself. And I think the other thing that the MBA did was, we had a session on leadership and being a learning leader and knowing that as a leader doesn't mean you have the answer to everything. One of the things when I went to do the MBA, we had to do a 360 degrees assessment, and I sent it to colleagues at Helios as I was leaving. They very graciously filled it out. So it was to my peers, to the people that reported into me, and to the people that I reported into, so my CEO. And the thing that came back when I thought was a thing of joy, and in hindsight it wasn't, was they came back and said, Adeola knows everything about this company. And I'm like, yeah, I felt a tap on my back. Yeah, I know everything. Of course I know everything. And I remember my leadership going, well, that's not a good thing though. Why do you need to know everything? Because you're not giving yourself space to learn. And if you know everything, well, you're setting yourself up for the things that you don't know that will affect, because you don't know everything, actually. You don't. So now I'm comfortable telling people, I don't know. I don't know the answer. If you put me in any environment and I don't know it, whereas before I'd scramble and panic and worry, I have the confidence to say to you, I don't know the answer to you, but let me go get the answer for you. And that's what the
Yeah, and
MBA.
I think it's a fairly common experience
Mm,
for lawyers, and I think especially in-house lawyers, that the business, not knowing quite what you're there for, at times views you as the encyclopedia that knows all the answers about everything.
yeah.
And when you first, I remember the first time I became, I think, a deputy GC and was, managing a team, staring at my phone, going, "Gosh, I hope it doesn't ring because they're going to ask me a question I don't know." You know?
Always the way. I think, and then you think, but I should know. Should I know? I should know.
Yeah.
And then, well, for me anyway, I'd get myself into a right um, situation thinking I should know this. And then all of a sudden I started to realize what the general counsel meant. General counsel is general. It's general for a reason. You do not need to, I think that even now when I have people in my team, if you don't know the answer, just tell me. It's better for me to know where you're at than for you to tell me you know it and then actually you don't and you've wasted everyone's time. So,
Well, that's a good segue to leading teams,
mm,
because it's not one of the things that, you're, I certainly didn't have any training in law school about, team leadership. It was something that, you kind of pick up over time and occasionally get some formal training. I'm sure you got some of that in your MBA training, but before that, what was the key for you to leading teams, and what's the difference between managing lawyers, non-lawyers, and different
mm,
generations?
woo.
There's about 50 questions in there, so you can pick whichever
Yeah,
ones you want to answer.
I'll pick the theme that still sits with me today, and it is I do not like to be surprised. Now, I know that's a bit of a contradiction because it seems to say that I must know everything. I don't need to know everything, but I can't be surprised. And what that does to my heads of that reporting to me is they need to know the stuff that's important that they need to escalate. So I don't need to know random stuff or stuff in your BAU world. But if you're having, I don't want to be accosted on an executive meeting by my chief sales officer and they're complaining about a deal that hasn't gone through because something's happening in my team. What should be happening is my team member needs to be telling me, Adeola, I'm having a bit of a sitch with this person, just so you're aware. And so I can play. So it still I still use it. I use it at Helios. I was do not surprise me. Um, and people kind of get it. So I don't want to know your, like I said, no, I don't want to know your day to day. So that's for you to manage. But if you think I should know something's going to come up at some point, please tell me sooner. So that's one. Another question about the different generations. Oh, that's an eye opener. I have a 19-year-old son, and I think he's helping me now, just in terms of his mentality, because I'm again the MBA taught us about something called VAPE, which is our values, attitude, personality, and experience, and how those fashion us, and we use them to judge or to interact with people. It's in our DNA, and we have to be careful with that because they will sometimes it's not it doesn't reflect what the other person's VAP is, if you like. So you're going to have a clash. So now, and I remember I used to think, when I was training, or I wouldn't dare push back on my boss if they asked me to do something. They said jump, I'd say how high, and I'll do it every day if you like. Whereas now, if I ask my team to do stuff, I know how to. I can't be demanding of it. I can't be presumptuous of it, and that's a good thing. We need to. That time has passed, and so even when I'm talking to my son now, he's in my house eating my food and I'm paying his bills. If I need him to do something for me, I need to come correct if I want it done. Not because he's not going to want to do it, but I can't just say, I just have to be conscious of how I ask of things. And so even in a work environment where you're surrounded by millennials or, I don't know even what the age group is, or Gen Zs, whatever they're called, um, I have to know that my background isn't theirs. Their story, my story isn't theirs. they've grown up differently, they've interacted differently, they've been treated differently. And I think there's a middle ground for all of us to work together. So, at the same time, I'm learning from them, but also they need to learn from us, right? We've got the experience. We know what we're saying. We just have to find a way to share that so that we're not rubbing each other the wrong way. Um, yeah. So that I think I've answered two questions. I've answered the theme of my management style and how I've handled, the other generations that are not of my generation, and how I have to be careful to get the best out of them. Because at the end of the day, it needs to be done, and I want to do it in the least stressful way I can find. And if I have to do a bit of mollycoddling and pandering a bit, not too much, because that's how they're set up, then we'll do what's required. But at the same time, there's a line drawn to say, okay, you can't mess me about either. Does that answer your question?
Most of them.
There was
I
one
think
other
the
one. Was it? There
one,
were three. There was another one.
the difference between, or if there isn't one, say so, between managing lawyers and non-lawyers.
Oh, yeah. So lawyers are kind of easy, irrespective of generation. It's easy. My last GC role at Solaris, I managed not just the legal team, but I managed the compliance team, the risk team. So the head of risk, the head of compliance, and the head of fraud and financial crime reported into me. They're non-lawyers. Um, and I had to respect that because they had knowledge I don't have. So yes, I might, I'm there to tee up all the information and present it to my board and make sure, I do a bit of helicoptering and making sure, because I can't, there's only one of me. But the thing I very quickly realized is, again, back to my knowledge with the MBA and other things, is I don't know everything. I've never said I won't say I know everything. And they bring something to the table. They bring an expertise that I don't have. So knowing that, and respecting that, is respect becomes really critical. Whether they're the head of or the second below or whatever, I don't know the thing you know. That's the starting point. If a question comes up, I'm going to come to your team and say, can you give me the answer? I don't know. So that alone means I have to respect them.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I was given the task of managing the head of security at a company I worked for. And
Mm.
I sat with the incumbent and said, Ed, the thing is I just don't know anything about managing security. And he looked at me and said, you don't have to manage security. You have to manage me. I know how to manage security.
Him, it's the person, exactly.
Yeah.
It's the person. It's the
Yeah.
person. And one of the things I did, just in sort of, again, with the different personalities, they think differently. For example, in compliance team, they're very, it's a risk. Everything is risk based. Their second line is a control function. We just have to. And then I have the legal team who are transactional. We want to buy, do deals. Completely different mindset. Kind of. Even the people in those teams are different. Their demeanor and their characters are different. And so what I quickly realize is, some of them, because of the way their characters are, they won't talk, they won't speak up. It's just the heads are the SMEs, so their heads are buried in books and they're reflective, and they've got all that mental bandwidth to analyze a legislation. Whereas my contract people want to do a deal yesterday, and they're quick and fast, and they turn it around very quickly. And then what I realized, that when I had my team meetings, it became critical that I then had one-to-ones with them, because for everyone, I wasn't doing it for one against the other. It was just every single person then had time with me every 2 weeks, where we didn't necessarily speak about work, but about them as human beings. What's going on in their world. I knew the ones whose kids were going into uni, or they were going on holiday, or something's happened at home, all of that stuff. And then you become much more personable that way, and then makes managing them a bit more personal. So I'd come in on a Monday and go, look, it's going to be a terrible week for me this week, just so you know. If I don't respond to you, it's nothing. And they get it. So I can say that to them without them thinking, oh, she said she's going to have a horrible week, because they know that Adeola is only telling this because she's being transparent, and so all of that becomes really important.
Yeah. It's like bothering the GC when the board meeting is coming up.
Just
It's just
Don't.
don't do it unless you want to have your head bitten off.
Just
Just don't
don't.
do
Don't do it.
it.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't exactly. I have a meeting with shareholders. Don't call me. Or if you must, just don't. In fact, and if it's super critical, unless it's no one's gonna die. It's like even my kids won't call me. I was like, no one's talking to me. So yeah.
So we may have some outside counsel listening. I hope we do, and they all want to know what the secret is to making you happy, so they get repeat business because they don't want your business just once. So, what is, in your mind, the important aspects of a relationship between a general counsel and her team and the outside counsel that we all rely on at times?
So external counsel, and I suspect it's the same thing in the US. It depends on who's hired. Have you inherited external counsel, or have I brought you in? If I've brought you in, then that's easy because there's a reason why I brought you in. Your role is to help me do my role successfully and to add value to what I need to do. Um, so if I've brought you in myself, it's because I've built a relationship with you. And before we get to that, for me to build a relationship with you, it means you have I don't know if it stood up, but you've done something extra that has resonated with me deeply that you didn't have to do. So, and it could be a small thing. It could be, you know, I have a board meeting next week. There's a shareholder matter. I can't remember the legislation or something. And you just say, you give me something really small that just opens up. And, it doesn't have, you don't have to be, don't even, I'm not even talking about taking me to dinner. That's not what I'm saying. It's stuff like, where my limitations are, you understand my business well enough, and you are there you want me to win. And people that want you to win, you can tell. They'll step in when you don't need them to without even requiring much. Um, if it's a law firm that's coming by a shareholder, for example, that's a different thing. Because frankly speaking, they're not there for me. They're there for the shareholder. And in my mind, um, those kind of law firms, I think to get my repeat business, you can't come across like you're there for the shareholder. Do you see what I mean? You
Yep.
have to come in level playing ground. I am here to sort out the company. Doesn't matter that I was recommended by a shareholder because you've done deals with that shareholder in another, I don't know, in another deal. You are here to make sure everyone wins. Which means if I'm seeing you, not backtracking, but going to, we have a discussion, but you're also going off to the shareholder and then recounting what we've done. All of that good, well, not good stuff, but stuff like that will come back to me, and you're not being a good lawyer then, because you're almost undermining me. So any external counsel that I finish a transaction with them and I come off thinking they've got their own agenda. Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
And I don't know how else to, and external lawyers know what I mean. When you have your own agenda, you've come in through a particular source, you've got a particular stakeholder that you want to keep engaged, and you do that to the detriment of the wider piece.
Yeah, I think that lawyers that do that, and it's certainly, especially in the private equity funded world
Yes,
that
that's
we've
where I'm
both
going.
inhabited, that's where it happens. Um, the lawyers that rely on their connections outside of with you as the general counsel
Mm,
will find that their firm may not get replaced, but they may not be on the team anymore within that firm.
possible.
You know,
You've got that
I've
kind of
certainly
power.
I've certainly made that happen and
I know
seen that
you.
happen.
I know yes, you could, but the thing also is now we are in a much more tighter world. Everyone speaks, all the GCs. I mean, I'm on so many networks, and barring any anti-competitive practices or anything like that, we ask for recommendations. And you'd be surprised if a particular name comes up 4 or 5 times going, do not touch this firm with a barge pole. You wonder why you were not getting business. So people talk. Now everything's connected. We talk on WhatsApp. You got all these. We're being courted now. To be a GC is quite incredible these days, because you're being courted. You're being, rightly so, to understand what our needs are. And I appreciate those things. There weren't things I saw in the last. It's probably kicked off since COVID, where law firms are really going out of their way to, and not just law firms, professional services firms as well, to help GCs get the support that they need without expecting anything. So in-house counsel always remembers that. What's that firm that didn't make me feel like I was taking, asking too many questions, who had my time. I have a particular law firm. I haven't used them yet, but every time I put my hand up on a chat of something, this woman will spend 20 minutes with me, and I know she's not expecting. Obviously, if something comes up, I will run it by her. If I'm opportune to instruct her firm, I will do so. But I know she's probably doing it from a BD point of view. But there's something selfless around. Look, let me tell you. Let me know how you get on. Use this. Go to this website. That will give you the answer. All of 5 minutes. I would never have that data if I didn't speak to people like that. And those kind of things that just make your life easier is always a plus.
So, what's your theory behind when you outsource work? Do you try to outsource as little as possible? How do you make the
But
decision, this is something we shouldn't do in-house anymore, or we need to outsource this piece of work because I just don't have the bandwidth to do it?
yeah,
How do you make those calls?
well, it's just size. If I have a small team, I'm not going to be able to run a litigation end to end. Just forget it. Not going to happen. Um, so it depends on if it's a standalone project. I try and do all our transactions, all our, in quote, buying and selling in house. I try and do all our fundraising in house if I can. Um, you can't actually do full funding. You still need external counsel, but I will use them minimally, because when you're doing fundraising multiple times, you kind of had everything set up, the framework for set up. You churn out the same docs, you sign the same docs, you do the same DD. It's the same thing. And maybe, when you get to documentation, because of time, you might get external counsel to do that. So things that are sort of succinct. Litigation is something that, unless you have a massive legal team, you can't. It takes over your life. So projects that are going to take over the bandwidth of my legal team, I will typically outsource. So if we were going to do an IPO, for example, I mean, just the expertise, the SME element of it that you don't usually have in house. Those kind of talents usually reside in private practice. So you have to get to private practice. But the things I like to keep in, because it's repeatable, it's an opportunity for people to train, to learn, is all my transactions are kept in house. All my M&A will be kept in house. Jennifer, I'm buying stuff. Um, um, Sort of, non-contentious matters are kept in house best as I can. But anything contentious, even searches like a trademark search, I use a trademark agent, and there's a quick, simple retainers, that kind of thing. I also said, I mean, things that are time consuming as well. So, for example, debt collection. I just get a law firm who knows your business to churn
Who
out
does that?
letters. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's far more efficient use of people's time.
So on that's the positive side. On the negative side, what does outside counsel do that makes you crazy and that makes you be like, I don't want to use them again. As soon as I'm done with them, I'm done with them.
Cockiness. So obviously, I've come to you for a reason, and um, if you make me feel, if you remind me by your actions in a bad way as to why I'm using you, then I'm not going to use you again. Does that make sense? So,
Yeah.
because you've come across arrogant, and you're not prepared to hear sides, and you have a way of doing things that are not necessarily my way. Doesn't mean mine is wrong, but you're not prepared to entertain. And law firms, big law firms do that. When I'm looking for, the next, I'm transitioning into a new role soon, and I'm curious around the panel that they have in place and how that plays out. Because what I do know is I am paying your bills. And I think you used to say that I'm paying your bills. If I need you to help, I need you to help. The other thing that I don't like is, and I can see it, when the partners don't let the associates shine. That's a thing that I noted a while back, where the associates that's doing your work every day. He's the one sending the emails. He's the one talking to you through documentation. And then when it's time to, you meet the big cheese of the company, he's the partner that I probably spoke to twice. I'm like, where's my guy? Where's the woman that I speak to every day? She's probably, buried somewhere on paper. So I won't use a firm if I feel like the associates and the junior people coming through the ranks they're not allowed to shine. You need to allow them to shine. Um, yeah. And then if you make me feel like, yeah, he's so arrogant or she's so arrogant, I will not use you again. Because everyone can use some humility. I know you've been doing it for a long time, but I'm GC for a reason, or I'm a chief legal officer for a reason. So please hear me when I say X. That's it, really. I mean, other than that, if it's a lot, if you've got a good vibe and you've got a sense of humor and you're smart, you don't waste my time. You know, we could work together for sure.
I just have two questions left.
Mm.
One is, if you think back to the time that you were in law school, what were you stressing about back then that you wish you could go back and tell yourself, stop worrying about that? That's not going to matter.
I thought that I needed to train in private practice. It was for a very, very long time. I kept feeling that I hadn't trained well enough. I didn't have the right pedigree. I mean, it's completely relevant in 2024 because now people aren't training in private practice. There's a whole stream that starts from last year where you have two routes to qualification. And I'm thinking,
Right.
wow, if I'd known that this was coming, question whether I would have killed myself thinking or second guessing myself into thinking that if you didn't qualify in private practice, you were a rubbish lawyer. Completely irrelevant. Um, so that's one. Um, and again, something I do now is you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be perfect. The 2080 rule, big thing. I live by that. I think they say perfection is the something of something. Perfection is there's a word there, can't remember.
Perfect is the enemy of the good.
Oh, the good, that's it. Perfect is the enemy of the good. And good is good enough. I don't need to be perfect. I'm not perfect. But I think I spent substantial, especially when I was at Accenture, I think I spent a huge amount of my time trying to be perfect. Having just so I'd obsessively go over documents over and over, and it's just so. I think when I came to Helios, I realized, well, no, nobody's got time for that. Have you read it twice? Is it clear? Okay, that's it. Let's go. That's it. It's just done. And I'm thinking, but I need to read it again. No, you don't need to read it again. We don't have the time. We need to move. I remember the other thing. I remember when we used to do those negotiations in Paris. And I used to think, oh, we need to prep for the negotiation because that's how I was trained at Accenture. When you're going to the other side, we have we know what we're going to say. And I'd go in with you and you'd freestyle. And I swear my heart used to jump because I'm like, oh my God, there's no plan here. Where are we going with this discussion? There is no plan. We're just freestyling. I do not like this. This is wrong. But no, it was fine. You don't need to know. Just land somewhere as long as
Well,
it's safe.
at that point, yeah, and I think that's probably a fair criticism of me at the time.
Ah, now you
In that
tell
I
me.
was I was probably freestyling more than I needed to be. On
Ah,
the other hand, I had probably participated in every draft of every major, you know, master lease agreement in
mm,
Africa in the
mm,
tower industry
yeah.
at that time. So it wasn't like there was some expert outside the room that we could have consulted. We really were the experts at that point,
Mm, mm,
us and, the people at two or three competitors. So,
yes.
we were as prepared as we were going to get. I mean,
Mm.
I completely agree that you ought to prepare for a negotiation if you can. I just don't think there was anything we could have done to prepare more other than just go in there
Yeah,
and
I
deal
remember
with the mobile network operator on the fly,
exactly. Yeah,
you know?
and the rules were but all that did was for me to go, calm down. The world will not come to an end. I think I needed that because of the way I had been at Accenture, which was everything was minuted. I knew exactly where I was going. I knew the end game. Would have prepped with the head of sales. We all had a plan. We're going boom, and it's done. And we didn't always do that at Helios. And I was like, is this even right? And then I realized, well, actually, no, it's fine. No, actually, no. That's I mean, it's a learning curve, right? It's just a different way of learning. You don't have to have perfection every single time.
So my last question is good old question from my litigation background, where at the end of the deposition, you'd ask the person across the table, "What didn't I ask you that I should have asked you?"
It's not actually work related. It's more like the thing that comes to mind is, are you happy?
Yeah.
That's a weird one. Are you happy doing this? Um, which was more to, are you comfortable handling this? Especially in the early days. And I would have lied and said, yeah, I wasn't. I would have lied anyway, so it would have been a mute point because I still said yes, even though I probably thought, oh, perhaps we can slow down a tiny little bit. I'm completely out of my comfort zone right now. Um, so that's the one. What other question? No, not. You gave me a lot of. You empowered me. That's the word. Huh? Empowered. And I remember after they kept saying that I was, I could not that I could do anything, but I don't think you ever shot me down ever. Like sort of said, maybe once in the beginning, but it was more, yeah, go for it. I want to do this, yeah, go for it. I'm like, can I do that? Yeah, yeah, go for it. It was very empowering. But I then realized that you didn't really like detail. You like the big thing. And I was asking too much about the detail. You're like, yeah, if it works, it works. If that's what, as long as it lines up with the strategy, I think it was good. And that was a good thing for me. That's it was very empowering to let people do stuff that they think and let them make their mistakes and let them come and go, I think I messed that up. Okay, well, so how are you gonna fix it? Because that's how you learn.
Fantastic. All right. Well, we're coming up on an hour, and I think I've used enough of your time, and
Oh,
I really
great.
appreciate it. Really enjoyed talking to you again. We need to make it not an every 5 years occurrence, but
I saw you last year though.
uh, that's true. You did. You did
I
on
did. I went
another
to
continent entirely.
and another continent completely. And another continent completely. Indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, thank you very much. I hope you have all you need, but let me know.